Thank you so much for checking out today's episode. If you could, please support this podcast by hopping over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any place that you're listening to this. Leave us a rating and review. Let us know what you loved most and what you would like to hear more of. But also, if you would like to learn how to take your business to the next level, whether it's using LinkedIn or working directly with myself and Nancy in our intimate group coaching programs, you can head over to www.thetimetogrowth.com or scottaaron.net to learn more. Thank you again for your support, love and gratitude, and I'll talk to you soon. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Networking and Marketing Made Simple. Super excited for today's episode for a number of reasons. Number one, I know you guys really enjoy these interviews, hearing from highly successful people and what they've done to get to the point in the career and business that they're in now. But also, this is something that I'm really excited about. This individual I've been connected to and following on LinkedIn for years. He's a LinkedIn top voice. He's got one of the largest followings. He's in the top, I don't even know, 0.5% of followings on LinkedIn. He's inspired my wife, and he speaks on a topic that I feel deserves more attention. And it actually, is very appropriate that we're having this conversation because his first book in the last 10 years just released. It's called Emotional Intelligence Habits. And obviously where you can get the book, where you can learn about it, find it, purchase it, dive into it, obviously will be in the description of this episode, and obviously the email that you received to listen to this episode. So I don't want to steal any more thunder from our guest today. So Travis Bradberry, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So before we talk about all things the book and obviously emotional intelligence itself and the habits behind it, obviously you have a storied career. This is not your first book on emotional intelligence. Obviously your first one was written a decade and a half ago. If you could rewind the tape and press stop at a certain point in your journey that you feel was really that pivotal moment or that light bulb moment for you that kind of turned everything on for you to lead you down the path that you've been on now for nearly 2 decades, what was that moment for you?
Wow. I mean, I've always been very entrepreneurial minded. I was in 3rd grade, selling my old Hot Wheels at lunch. In 6th grade, we had a gum racket where my friend's neighbor had this gum from the Middle East called Fresh Lamb. You couldn't get anywhere else. So we would sell it at school and kids would go nuts for it because they couldn't buy it at the store. So that's always been an itch that scratched of mine. And, I started a business at a pretty young age. I was in grad school. I was about 24 when I started Talent Smart. But I think a big pivotal moment for me was the idea to write books. I guess I'm a big reader, sort of online research articles type. I'm not a big novel guy. And so I didn't really see myself as being a book author. I had a friend my company started by developing assessments. Our emotional intelligence assessment was really popular. And I had a friend that wrote a book with Ken Blanchard. And he's like, look, and he had a business consulting practice like ours. He said, look, this is the way to go. This is how you build your brand. So I went on that journey and it's been very fulfilling for me. I really, really like the idea of capturing your ideas and putting them out there and seeing how people respond to them. Every small amount of interest is valuable. And then if you have one like my last book that, sold 3 million copies, it's super rewarding. So yeah, I think that was the spark.
Yeah. And my wife released her first book last year. I'm working on my 6th that's coming out later this year.
Nice.
And you're right, though, that there's something very empowering about knowing that things that you love and that you do can empower others. But, the side effect of getting the book out there that is available for people to buy forever and ever and ever, it's like that trickle down effect. Now, emotional intelligence is something that my wife and I are familiar with, but a lot of people aren't. So let's break down, I guess, in very, very plain science for people, the idea or what emotional intelligence actually is, and when harnessed, when recognized, how could it benefit not just your life, but your business as well?
Yeah, well, emotional intelligence is it's your capacity for understanding emotions in yourself and others. And then it's what you do with that information. Once you're armed with that information, are you able to manage emotions effectively to achieve the outcomes that you want in life? This is important because our brains are hardwired to give emotions the upper hand. Every signal that travels through your brain as you experience the world around you, it goes straight through your limbic system long before you're able to think. So your limbic system is where your emotions are generated. So long before you're able to think rationally. So that means we have about 400 emotional experiences every single day, whether you're aware of them or not. And what we found is that people who are emotionally intelligent, who are aware of these emotions, tend to be more effective because they then are driving the bus, so to speak, as opposed to having this blind eye to all this feeling that's driving their behavior.
Now, for people that are, I would say, the passenger in their emotional intelligence journey, how does someone go from being the passenger of their emotions to actually the driver of their emotions and understanding what they are, how to move through them, but also how to remain uh, valuable in no matter what's going on in your life?
The way you move from being a passenger to a driver is by leaning into the discomfort that comes with increased self-awareness. Inevitably, as things come to your attention that you're not aware of, it stings. It just does. It's uncomfortable. You feel uh, kind of stupid. Like, why am I doing this? This is such, it's such a small thing, and I'm having this outsized reaction to it, and it makes you feel like it's uncomfortable. So the mental shift that happens once you understand that that discomfort is enabling you to improve your EQ, that really gets people leaning into it, and they go, oh, okay, I'm going to seek that discomfort out because that's the only way I can have the knowledge to change that behavior.
What what inevitably drew you to emotional intelligence? Because again, you've written multiple books on it. It's a passion of yours, and it's something that you speak about, you talk about. What was that driving force that really kept pushing you towards not just understanding your emotional intelligence, but once you understood it, once you harnessed it, I want to teach this. I want to talk about this. I want to educate people on this. What was the driver for you?
Yeah, for me it was that discomfort. I kind of love it. I when I was an undergrad, one of my professors went over Peter Salovey from Yale, his research on emotional intelligence, which was brand new at the time. And I just realized, wow, I didn't learn this growing up. My mom grew up on a farm. It's like pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of mentality. Like, not that we like completely ignored feelings, but we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about them. So that just was like really eye-opening for me. So, I was young, 19 or 20 years old, starting to study this. I was only at university for 3 years. I graduated early. So I was starting grad school at age 21. And in grad school, you dive into, you choose your own research path. And I chose emotional intelligence. So by the time I graduated, it was a dual PhD program. So it took 5 years. I had started a business. I had validated an assessment. I had done all kinds of research on emotional intelligence because I was really passionate about it.
So, you mentioned earlier on that you were very young to the game as far as being a business owner, being an entrepreneur. You started your first business while in grad school at 24, a year before you even graduated. A lot of entrepreneurs listen to this podcast, and obviously, I always cite Darren Hardy, who wrote The Compound Effect, but also The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster, because there are a lot of ups and downs. Looking back on that journey of your Talent Smart company that you had for nearly 20 years, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur and as a business owner that you necessarily, and again, I think maybe being as young as you were played to your benefit. I started my first business at 19. And when you're that young, you're not really exposed to the everyday world all too much. So you kind of are more willing to kind of lean into the uncomfortable. But what were some
Yeah.
unforeseen challenges that you faced in that time of starting your first company?
For me, the big thing is I found over and over again as an entrepreneur that your the place you really want to give up the most is usually when you're that close to finally breaking through. And I don't know why that is. Someone's probably studying this and they can explain it better than I can. But I ran into that over and over again. So much so that now that I'm, have some experience, some age, I remind myself of that, when in those moments I say, I must be really close to breaking through because I'm frustrated as hell right now.
Yeah, the sometimes those frustrations are the tipping points to, something else bigger. Uh I always talk about the peak, the valley of one area ends up being the peak of another. So there's just dips and valleys all the time. You're climbing and climbing. Once you get to that pinnacle, there's another valley to go through, there's another pinnacle to get to, and it's ever evolving. So, obviously, you've written multiple books on EQ. Um, writing a book is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of people that have great books inside of them. They just feel like, who am I to write a book? No one's going to read it. No one's going to care. What was that driving force for you, even though, again, in the mentoring that you got to build that personal brand, because that speaks to myself and Nancy, like having a book is one of the best brand builders. How effective have all of your books been for you in establishing yourself as that credible source, that value added source, and that expert in the EQ space?
Yeah, no, it's been massive. Having thought leadership, establishing thought leadership, if you have a business that provides a service, is really important. It can be important for a product-based business too. But for us, it started with the assessment. So and that assessment actually comes with my book, Emotional Intelligence Habits. You get a passcode to take it. But I wrote that assessment back in 2001, and it got pretty popular pretty quickly. But it wasn't like a B2C type thing. It was all B2B. So, and it was mostly focused on workplace learning. So HR types, organizational development type people. So we were getting popular in a very small niche. What a book does is it lets you get popular in a much larger niche. And that allowed us to get that sort of B2C connection. But yeah, it's the thing with a book is you have to be willing to take some risk because you're going to spend a lot of time on it. And most books that people put out, they end up earning less than minimum wage on, right? If you work 3,000 hours on a book and you sell 5,000 copies, you will feel accomplished, but you won't have the dollars to show for it. And that's just the reality of the game. And I've written books that have sold 3 million copies, and I've written books that have sold 5,000 copies. So, it's just the nature of the beast.
And a book ends up being a catalyst for bigger and better things. It ends up being a jumping off point for other stuff. And I think there's a lot of people that think, you know what, I'm going to be the next New York Times bestseller. I'm going to be the next million copy seller. To your point, a lot of things have to happen at one time for that to happen. And that's not to say the book that you wrote that only sold 5,000 copies, that's not to diminish the value that's in that book. It's just there's a lot of people writing books, and you can't control what the marketplace has and whose hands it's going to get in. But to your point, it ends up being something much greater later on, because for the amount of people that start a book and don't finish it, there's a greater amount of people that are in that space than the ones that actually follow through and put it out there. And it is an accomplishment. Once that book is published and it's out there, it is something very much to be proud of. Now, something that I was curious about is you mentioned that right before we jumped on that it'd been about 10 years since you've released a book. And for me, I do a lot of LinkedIn consulting, and I do a lot of LinkedIn education, building your brand on there. And I made it a goal of mine to release a book, every 2 to 3 years, just to stay up to date so I'm relevant. Obviously, a lot has changed in the EQ space since your first book. What do you feel contributed to waiting 10 years to produce this new book that I'm very excited to read myself, but also for people to get their hands on? Um, was it just information gathering, or was it right time, right place? What do you feel contributed to just making sure that everything was there and ready, and waiting the 10 years that you did in between the two books?
Yeah. Oh, I think a lot of it has to do with when you write a book that's sticky and it sells well, the smartest thing you can do is focus on selling that book and not on writing another one. Not that you shouldn't write another book, but you need to give it its due course. And I don't know that I'm kind of a free thinker. I don't necessarily lean on other people real hard for advice, but this was some advice, really great advice I got from Ken Blanchard at a young age. He wrote a book called The 1 Minute Manager in the 80s. It was his first book. It sold like millions and millions and millions of copies. And he's like, I just asked him, I saw him at a trade show and, on booth building day and I just asked him, for one piece of advice for someone who wanted to write business books. And he said, when you get a good one, spend time promoting that book. Don't start writing the next one. Everybody wants to start writing the next one thinking they're going to build. So with the book I wrote in 2009 was, I think, my fourth book, and it sold really well, better than anything else. And I think I waited 3 years and I wrote another book, but not about emotional intelligence, about leadership. And it did all right. I mean, it sold, I don't know, a couple 100,000 copies. It's not bad, but it's not at the same level. So I thought, you know what, I need to just go back on focusing on this book. And that was 2012. But I feel like this is kind of a long-winded answer. But in 2014, I got invited to join the influencer program on LinkedIn. And every article that I wrote was getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of reads. So I completely shifted gears and I focused on writing articles. And I've accumulated these articles over the past 9 years. And a lot of those articles and what people really liked became the impetus for Emotional Intelligence Habits. I've begun to realize, wow, okay, I sold my business in 2019. I'm not running the business anymore. I don't have those executive duties holding me back. I can do whatever I want. What do I want to do? I'm like, I want to turn these ideas into a book. And that's why I finally decided to write Emotional Intelligence Habits.
I love that. And it's so funny because, we help people take their expertise, turn that expertise into LinkedIn newsletter editions. And after you accumulate enough of them, you can turn that into a book. One of our clients actually just did that. He's been a law professional for 45 years, and he just released a business mindset book for lawyers, how to overcome certain, trials and tribulations in their business career. And he did it by writing articles on LinkedIn that people loved. So before we get to the book, obviously LinkedIn, I hold it very near and dear to my heart. I love the platform. I think it's just incredible. The people that are on there, the content that is out there. What initially drove you, prior to being tapped as a LinkedIn voice and all the stuff that you're doing? What drove you to use that platform, and what big changes have you personally seen in the last number of years with LinkedIn itself as a platform?
Okay, so for me, let's rewind back to like 2012, 2013. I was already a best-selling author. And as a result, I would get all these connection requests on LinkedIn from people I didn't know. And then I ended up having this bulging network of that wasn't relevant to me, I already had a newsletter that, almost all my books have come with an assessment. And when you take the assessment, you can choose to join my newsletter. So I always had a newsletter that had a pretty big following. And then LinkedIn started their influencer program, and I asked to join, and they told me no, that it was closed. So I wrote, and they said, but what we can do is we're about to release this blogging feature that anyone can do, so we'll let you do that. So my first article got 1 million views in like a day. It went viral on LinkedIn. And then the next week and that article was on stress, how to beat stress and stay calm. The next week I wrote one on toxic people. That got 1 million reads in a day. And all of a sudden, the same guy that told me the program that was closed sent me an email and he's like, hey, would you like to join the influencer program? People really like your articles.
Oh, by the way, we have the spot open now.
Yeah. So I, naturally I swallowed my pride and said, yes, I'd love to join the influencer program. I didn't tell him I told you so. And yeah, back then, the way the influencer program was structured, it was just begging your piece to go viral. If you wrote anything that was sticky at all, it would rise to the top, it would get featured. If you were the #1 article in a 24-hour period, every time someone read an article on the site, it would load yours next. So like, if in the first 24 hours you got 600,000 reads, you were going to get like 1 million more or 2 million more in the next 24 hours. So for me, I just became completely focused on that. I was writing 2 new articles a week, and these articles are pretty time consuming, to really try to do 800, 1,000 words, how to research driven. It's not easy. And I got really into it, and I built a pretty big following. And that's sort of how I mentioned earlier, where I got kind of distracted by LinkedIn. That's how it happened.
So let's talk about the new book, because, obviously, I've already pre-ordered a copy for myself and my wife, which and I want my whole mastermind to read it, because I think it's really important for people to understand it. Let's talk about some of the EQ habits that are talked about in this book, because again, I still feel that EQ is to some entrepreneurs, to some business owners, it's still an anomaly. They're not really quite sure what it is. Obviously, it's understanding your emotions, how to handle them. But what are some of not without giving away all the keys to the castle, what are some of those habits that you talk about in the book that people can start leveraging right now in their everyday life to better manage their emotions, where they can be more productive in every facet of their life?
Yeah. So, the book does introduce you to emotional intelligence and what the 4 skills are, self-awareness and self-management, social awareness and relationship management. It spends time on that and making the case for why emotional intelligence is such an important skill set, why people who are higher in EQ tend to outperform those who aren't. But that's like 10% of the book. 90% of the book are these habits, and these habits are all driven by, honestly, my test audience on LinkedIn of what people wanted to learn about. What can I apply emotional intelligence to? And that's why the book starts with beating stress and staying calm, dealing with toxic people, likability, confidence, having a growth mindset. It translates EQ to all of these outcomes, these important things that people want to see in their life. I show them how they can use emotional intelligence and micro behaviors to get themselves in the place that they want.
So for someone that is new to you, obviously a great place to connect with you would be on LinkedIn to kind of dive into more of your content. What can someone expect outside of learning the core principles? Like what are the big takeaways that you are hoping for people to take away from this new book that you just released?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think that people need to understand that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. These small things that you do every day, they're hugely important. And the reason is your brain loves efficiency. When you have a new behavior and you repeat it, your brain takes notice. And it forms pathways that reinforce that behavior so that you do it without thinking about it. This is the nature of habit. You can use that to eradicate bad habits and form new good habits. So that's the big one. But the other one is that you can use emotional intelligence to achieve whatever outcome you want in life. It's not just the situations that are very obviously emotionally driven, like dealing with a toxic person, but it's also things like your productivity, your ability to climb the career ladder at work. I mean, these are all the kind of topics I address, and I show people how to use EQ to achieve those outcomes.
I love that. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you sold your company in 2019 and you were trying to figure out, okay, what is it I want to do next? Is obviously the book was what was next, but after you sell the company, you're trying to figure out things, and it led you to the writing the book. Is there anything that you've experienced since selling the business where you're not running a day-to-day business anymore like that, that I don't know, you have found helpful, or maybe you were unaware of, that was going to kind of bubble up after selling the company and having all this time? Was there something that populated during that time period?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Having a successful business is such a privilege. And when you're in charge of that business and there are fires all over the place that need to be put out, right? And everything kind of gets bumped up to you, you tend to it's easy to develop kind of a negative mindset and to fail to appreciate the amount of privilege that you have. So for me, and you end up start thinking about things like exits. I mean, I loved my company. I loved everybody that worked there. We had an incredible team, but you start to think of, yeah, when it's time to get out, this chunk of change you can get, etc. And for me, once that happened, I felt like a piece of me had been taken away. I underestimated how much value I assigned, how much importance and joy I took from being a part of this business, from being a leader, from offering my ideas to people, to building a culture, to doing all these things. And that was a tough one for me. It took some time, and it actually motivated me to start writing and to kind of put myself out there. Even though I didn't need to do it financially, I needed it intrinsically inside me. And so that's kind of the process that I went through.
I also noticed that you're into AI and stuff now. I mean, Nancy, I mean, it's running rampant, which I think, obviously there are so many great advances. What's your personal feeling on AI and, the business space that a lot of people are in? But also, what's your message to those people that are not fully in with AI, and how wonderful it can be, and how it could help so many businesses, the people that think it's evil and it's going to replace jobs? What's your take on all that?
Yeah, for me, I think AI is incredible at creating efficiency. There's certain processes that AI can make just exponentially more efficient. And I got involved, a friend started a company called LeadX that uses AI to send you nudges through an app. So the idea is, and I'm an investor in that company, and I have an advisory role. What it does is you give it input. You take assessments, personality assessments, emotional intelligence assessments. You can take a test like the Strengths Finder that's really popular, and tell the app your scores. And it uses AI to integrate all this knowledge about you and tell you what you should do to improve. And then you get these nudges from the app in your pocket. So to me, that's an example of creating efficiency. So an executive coach could sit there all day long and not provide as many nudges for the 50,000 people on the app as the AI can do in 5 minutes. It's incredible, and it's powerful, and it gives you a method of learning on the go that people really need nowadays.
Where do you see AI going into the future?
Well, I think obviously anywhere that it creates efficiency, I think it's going to be adopted. I don't know all the ways that that's going to surface. I mean, but I run into it almost every day. I just spoke to a friend the other day, a longtime friend. She's a physician, a family practitioner, and a friend taught her about AI, and she's developed this process for physicians to create informational videos. So if you feed the AI like 3 short paragraphs, it will turn it into an informational video for your patients. And she's blowing her colleagues' minds, because she's like, hey, give me 3 paragraphs on sleep hygiene or something. And they give it to her, and she's like, here's a video with your voice and your likeness explaining to your patients why this is important. I mean, it's incredible, and it's so hyper specific. And that's, for me, when I say I don't know what AI is going to do, I see all these hyper specific examples that are wild, right? They're really powerful.
I mean, it's just, my wife was showing me the other day about how there's this AI tool, and this is like, I'm a dad, so she was showing me, you can take your kid's picture, take a picture of it, upload it into this AI tool, and create an animated movie with this picture that they drew, and actually put backgrounds to it and make a full scale small movie clip based on something that they drew on a piece of paper. So it's just amazing what can be done. Um, Really quickly before we get into where people can get the book and everything, and my final question before that, with EQ and everything that you've been doing with organizations and companies, if you could share with the audience, um, I guess a powerful story that you've heard or you know of where, your teachings, your beliefs about EQ, how did it really turn around either an individual or an organization, with understanding how to harness the power of EQ?
Yeah, it's interesting. Later in my career, I was, I didn't do consulting directly myself, but we had teams of consultants. And I would get involved in some sort of advisory type roles on projects. And I saw some really interesting projects, like one with a division of Fortune Brands, which is a Fortune 500 company. And they were trying to create leaders of the future. So they gave leaders 3 different ways they could work on their EQ that were voluntary. And a year later, they correlated how much time leaders spent working on their EQ against the bottom line performance metrics that the organization used to measure performance, right? And these were senior leaders. So if you were in charge of operations, it was like the efficiency of the factories, sales growth, blah, 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 like bottom line stuff. And the more time people spent working on their EQ, the better their bottom line improvements were. I mean, it's fascinating. And as an individual, working with individuals early in my career, that was something that I did. I did executive coaching. And I worked with a woman who was an executive at a telecommunications company. And she was a bull in a china shop, to say the least. She was a handful for her employees to deal with. So working on EQ was very eye-opening for her. And she really leaned into the discomfort and she made some changes, but big changes. But we focused only on these emotional intelligence skills. And this is something I discuss in the book because I've seen this time and time again. When you focus on the emotional intelligence skills, you tend to see results in a lot of areas of your life that you didn't even realize you were working on. So for her, she was also a softball coach, and she would brag to me about how her daughter could throw a pitch that broke 6 inches left to right. She was so proud and so animated about it. And she comes into her coaching session and she says, tell you what, I'm standing there behind the fence in the dugout, and one of the dads comes up to me and he says, you're getting coached, aren't you? And you got 360, aren't you? And she said, yes, I'm working with an executive coach. We've done the 360s. He says, I can see it. Your approach to the girls is entirely different. It's more collaborative. You're creating buy-in instead of barking orders at them. He's like, keep up the good work. And we never discussed her coaching skills. We only focused on EQ and her leadership skills in the workplace. So that's one of the benefits of these 4 skills, right? Emotions, 400 emotional experiences every single day. When you master your emotional intelligence, it trickles into everything that you do.
Oh, that is so cool because it's something obviously you should probably never realize, but when you're understanding your emotions, you realize, to your point, 400 emotional experiences a day. If you learn how to really cope and master those emotions and those experiences, to your point, it affects your personal experiences, your professional experiences, your relationship experiences, all of those things. So, so much value in this short episode. And Travis, before I get to my final question, obviously we've been talking about the book. What's the best way for people to connect with you, get their hands on the book, and learn from you further?
Yeah, if you want to get the book, if these ideas appeal to you, I'd love for you to read it. It's on Amazon. It's finally 50% off. They're real slow with their steep discounting now, so we're finally 50% off, under $20. And then of course on LinkedIn, I post 2 articles a week, writing about emotional intelligence and similar topics. So if you want to look me up there, I'm Dr. Travis Bradberry, and you can join my newsletter, and you'll get new articles all the time.
Awesome. All that information obviously will be in the description of this episode and the email that went out to announce this amazing episode, and obviously on social as well. Travis, final question before we sign off. What does success truly mean to you?
What does success truly mean to me? It's certainly the ability to be able to do what you want. That's a big thing. But I also feel like achieving goals is really important. I think that, having some big audacious goals that you want to achieve, knowing that you're not going to achieve all of them doesn't diminish the satisfaction of those that you do at all.
Awesome. Yeah, it's sometimes you have to have that North Star, you have to have that compass, and you got to realize that the only way to succeed is to fail first. And again, to your point, you're not going to achieve everything, but if you do create and have that forward thinking of those big, hairy, audacious goals, you'll be amazed at what happens. So Travis, I just want to thank you again so much for being here today. Much continued success in everything that you're doing, and congrats on the new book. Can't wait to get my hands on it myself and my audience. So thank you again for being here today.
Thanks so much.
So everyone, as always, wherever you're listening this to and from, leave us a rating and review. Let us know what you loved. Reach out to myself or Travis. Let us know what you thought about the episode. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll talk to you next time. Networking and Marketing Made Simple is for you, the business owner that has a product, service, or a message that you truly believe in. Each week, we'll take a behind-the-scenes look at real-world networking and marketing tactics, leveraging LinkedIn to get what you have in front of many more people. Thanks for spending time with me, and let's get started.